Ever feel like you're going head-to-head with your own brain and losing?
Like it's a battle for control,
R-
and, well, you're kind of the hostage and the kidnapper at the same time.
Exactly. That's the wild ride J. Paul Nadeau takes us on and take control of your life.
We're tackling self-sabotage, but through the lens of hostage negotiation, which, let me tell you, is a lot more relatable than it sounds.
So, right off the bat, Nadeau calls this self-hostage, this feeling of being trapped by our own thoughts and habits.
And those bad boys can really take over, huh? Derailing your goals, relationships, the whole shebang.
But here's the thing, Nadeau says it's not a life sentence, it's a choice. We're not born self-saboteurs, we kind of learn it along the way.
Which is both empowering and kind of terrifying, right? Like, wait, I'm doing this to myself.
And to really drive this home, he actually pulls from his experience training Iraqi police cadets.
Now, this was intense. Turned out some of these cadets were secretly terrorists, driven to desperate measures by, well, life.
Like they were promised family security, that sort of thing, if they cooperated.
Exactly, and it just shows how fear and desperation can make people do crazy things.
Even seemingly rational people, right? It's like we've all made questionable decisions when we're scared or stressed.
Totally. And Nadeau and his partner even found themselves surrounded by these cadets one morning. Talk about a hostage situation.
Okay, now that's just straight up chilling. It really makes you think about those moments when your brain goes haywire.
Like one minute you're fine, the next you're spiraling into self-doubt, questioning every move you've ever made.
And just like a real hostage situation, the longer those thoughts hold us captive.
The harder it is to break free. It's like that saying, if you hear something enough times, you start to believe it, even if it's coming from inside your own head.
So how do we break free? We become our own hostage negotiators.
Exactly. Nadeau's big thing is self-awareness. We got to spot those intrusive thoughts before they escalate into a full-blown crisis.
Easier said than done, though, am I right? It's like our brains are pros at sneaking in those negative whispers.
It's true, but we can train ourselves to be more vigilant. Just like you'd be more alert walking alone at night, you can develop that same awareness with your thoughts.
So instead of letting those I'm not good enough thoughts play on repeat, we need to catch them and be like, hold up, brain, what are you doing?
Exactly. It's about challenging those automatic responses and choosing a different path.
So how do we even begin to rewire those deeply ingrained thought patterns? It's like we've been living with them for years.
It's definitely a process, but Nadeau offers a pretty practical framework. He calls it the Self-Empowering and Enabling Management Plan, or SEMP for short.
SEMP. Okay, gotta love a good acronym.
Right. Think of it like a SWOT analysis, but for your mind. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What opportunities are out there? And what threats are holding you back?
So instead of getting swept away by negativity, we can use the SEMP thing to get strategic about it. I like it.
Exactly. Let's say procrastination is your hostage taker. Your strength might be that laser focus you have when something really lights your fire.
But your weakness. Maybe you're easily distracted or a bit of a perfectionist, always waiting for the perfect moment to start.
Bingo. And by identifying those things, you're not just emotionally reacting anymore, you're creating a tactical plan to regain control.
Okay, so we've got our game plan, but what happens when those doubts start whispering, you can't do this, you're not capable of change?
That's where Nadeau's own story really hits home, because he almost walked away from his entire career because of it.
Wait, seriously?
He was this close to quitting the police force because of negativity from, get this, his colleagues. Imagine that kind of environment day in and day out.
It's like its own form of hostage situation. Being surrounded by negativity like that can really wear you down.
Absolutely. And it shows that even someone like Nadeau, who literally wrote the book on this stuff, still faces those internal struggles.
So how did he escape?
He made a choice. He decided to focus on his own definition of success, on his goals, and he found a way to break free from all that external negativity.
So he essentially negotiated with his own doubts and anxieties, just like he would with a hostage taker in a real-life situation.
It's a powerful example of how we always have a choice, even when we feel trapped.
He keeps coming back to that idea of choice, doesn't he? Like it's this constant thread throughout his work.
It is, and it ties into another fascinating concept he brings up, victimology.
Victimology, as in like why some people become victims of crime.
Exactly. But Nadeau takes it a step further. He argues that the same principles that make someone vulnerable to crime can also make them vulnerable to, well, themselves.
Okay, now my brain is really intrigued. How does that even work? Like, How does my tendency to, say, overthink every decision relate to being a victim?
Well, imagine this. A criminal is more likely to target someone who seems unsure of themselves, right? Someone who's not paying attention, who lacks confidence.
Right, they're an easier target. But how does that apply to our own thoughts?
Think about it. If you're constantly second-guessing yourself, overthinking every move, aren't you more susceptible to those negative thoughts? More likely to let them take root?
Oh, I see where you're going with this. It's like we become victims of our own self-doubt, our own lack of confidence.
Precisely. And just like projecting confidence can deter a criminal, understanding our own vulnerabilities, those tells that make us more susceptible can help us avoid those mental traps.
So it's like learning self-defense, but for our minds.
Exactly. Instead of being blindsided by those negative thoughts, we can anticipate them, develop counter strategies, and be ready to fight back.
He also talks about something called Stockholm Syndrome, which, in this context, sounds a bit unsettling.
It does, doesn't it? But the basic idea is that sometimes, even though it seems crazy, we start to sympathize with our captors, even when those captors are our own negative thoughts.
So instead of fighting back, we start to identify with those self-defeating beliefs, almost defending them.
It's like we've become so accustomed to living in that mental prison that we start to see it as normal, even comfortable.
Like, oh, that's just how I am. I'm a worrier. I'm a procrastinator. I'm not good enough. And we just accept it as true.
Exactly. We've surrendered to our captors those negative beliefs without even realizing we had a choice.
But Nadeau would say we don't have to stay trapped. We always have the power to choose a different path, to break free.
Exactly. It's about reclaiming our power, recognizing those self-imposed limitations,
Yeah.
and choosing to see ourselves as capable of change, capable of creating a life we truly love.
It's like we've gotten so used to living in that mental prison, we don't even realize there's a key, right?
Absolutely. But just like those stories of people who were held captive for years but never gave up hope, we can break free from those self-imposed limitations.
It's about tapping into that inner resilience, right? That strength to keep fighting for a better life, even when things seem bleak.
Exactly. And Nadeau believes we all have that strength within us. He even talks about these seeds of greatness that we all possess.
Seeds of greatness. Okay, now I'm really curious. Tell me more about that.
It's this idea that we all have this incredible potential for happiness, for success, for living a life that feels truly fulfilling.
But sometimes those seeds get buried under all the self-doubt and negativity.
Precisely. It's like they need the right conditions to grow, the right kind of nourishment. And that nourishment comes from changing our internal dialogue, from challenging those deeply ingrained negative beliefs.
So instead of just accepting those thoughts as truth, we need to start questioning them. Be like, hold up, brain, where'd you get that information?
Exactly. He talks about asking ourselves, is this thought even true, or is it just something I've been telling myself for so long that I've started to believe it?
It's like becoming a detective in our own minds, looking for clues as to why we think and feel the way we do.
And a good detective knows that evidence matters. So instead of just blindly accepting those negative thoughts, start looking for evidence to the contrary.
So, like, if I'm constantly telling myself I'm not good enough, I need to start looking for proof that I am. Evidence of my accomplishments, my strengths, all the times I've proven myself wrong in the past.
Exactly. Focus on the facts, not just the feelings.
But that can be hard, right? Especially when those negative thoughts have been running the show for so long. It's like they have a way of creeping back in no matter how hard you try to shut them out.
It's true, those thoughts can be persistent, but Nadeau emphasizes the importance of self-compassion, especially when those thoughts do pop up.
Okay, self-compassion. That's one of those things that's easier said than done, isn't it? Like, how do you actually show yourself compassion when you feel like you're constantly messing up?
It starts with treating yourself with the same kindness and understanding that you would offer a good friend. Imagine a friend came to you feeling like a failure. What would you say to them?
I'd probably tell them to cut it out, that they're being too hard on themselves, that everyone makes mistakes. I'd remind them of all the great things about them, all the reasons why I value their friendship.
Exactly. You wouldn't berate them for their mistakes or dwell on their shortcomings, would you? You'd offer support, encouragement, maybe even a little bit of humor to lighten the mood.
And yet, we so often treat ourselves way worse than we'd ever treat someone we cared about. It's like we reserve all our harsh judgment for the person we should be most kind to ourselves.
It's a common pattern, but it's a pattern we can break. And it starts with recognizing that we're all a work in progress, that imperfections are part of what makes us human.
And that it's okay to make mistakes, to stumble and fall along the way. It's how we learn and grow.
Exactly. So Next time you find yourself caught in a spiral of self-criticism, try asking yourself, what would I say to a friend who is feeling this way? And then offer yourself that same level of compassion and understanding.
It's about silencing that inner critic and replacing it with a more supportive, encouraging voice. A voice that says, hey, you're doing your best, and that's enough.
Absolutely. And that's where those seeds of greatness come back into play. It's not enough to just wish for change,
Yeah.
to simply hope for a better future. We need to actively nurture those seeds to create the conditions for them to grow.
So it's less about thinking and more about doing, like taking action to create the life we want.
Exactly. Nadeau is all about practical advice, actionable steps we can take to start unhostaging our minds and creating a life that feels truly authentic and fulfilling.
So less talking, more action. Where do we even begin? It can feel overwhelming, like we need a whole life makeover.
That's where those tender, loving cares Nadeau talks about come in, those TLCs.
And no, we're not talking spa days and mani pedis here, though I wouldn't say no to those.
Right, but this is about building a solid foundation for, well, your well-being. You got to be strong to face those hostage-taking thoughts.
So think marathon training, not a sprint to the finish line.
Exactly. You got to fuel upright and get your rest to go the distance. So Nadeau breaks it down into a few key areas. First up, exercise.
And don't worry, he's not asking us to become marathon runners overnight.
Unless you're into that, then go for it. It's more about finding something you enjoy that gets you moving.
Even a quick walk a few times a week can do wonders. He talks about those endorphins, those feel-good chemicals in our brains.
Like hitting the reset button on a bad mood. Then there's nutrition. Again, Nadeau isn't about deprivation or crazy diets.
It's more about being mindful of what we're putting in our bodies. All right.
Exactly. And how those choices make us feel. So maybe swap out those sugary snacks that leave you crashing for something with more staying power.
Whole foods, that sort of thing. Makes sense.
It's about fueling your brain and body for the long haul. And speaking of fuel, let's talk about sleep. You ever tried to negotiate on no sleep? It's rough.
Been there, done that. Definitely wouldn't recommend it.
Nadeau really stresses a regular sleep schedule and a relaxing bedtime routine.
So no more scrolling through social media until 2 a.m. Guilty as charged.
We've all been there. But honestly, we can't underestimate a good night's sleep. It's amazing how much clearer everything seems when you're well rested.
Couldn't agree more. And he also talks about getting out in nature, right?
Absolutely. Nadeau's a big believer in nature's ability to calm our minds and de-stress. Even a short walk in a park can work wonders.
It's like hitting the pause button on a crazy day.
Exactly. And speaking of support, don't forget the power of connection. We weren't meant to do this alone.
Having a good support system, friends, family, a therapist can make a world of difference.
It's like having a team of negotiators on your side, helping you through those tough spots. Nadeau reminds us that it's okay to ask for help, to lean on others when we need it.
And on the flip side, maybe setting some boundaries with those who tend to bring us down or reinforce those negative thoughts.
Right, you know the saying, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Choose your company wisely.
So true. And what about hobbies? Those things that light us up, make us forget about our worries for a while?
Nadeau loves that stuff. He says those passions help us reconnect with who we really are, the parts of us that might be, well, held hostage by self-doubt.
It's like those activities remind us that we're more than just our anxieties and insecurities. We have talents, interests, things that bring us joy.
Exactly. And that joy is powerful. Don't underestimate it.
Yeah.
Oh, and speaking of recharging, relaxation and stress management are key.
It's not selfish, it's essential.
Totally. Nadeau says it's like putting on your own oxygen mask first. You can't help anyone else if you're gasping for air.
So what are some go-to stress relievers?
Nadeau suggests things like meditation, deep breathing, even just taking a few minutes to sit quietly and just be present.
Finding those moments of stillness in a world that never seems to stop, right?
It's so important. And again, it's about finding what works for you, what helps you unwind and de-stress.
It's amazing how these little acts of self-care, these TLCs, can make such a difference.
It's like building a fortress of well-being, brick by brick. And that foundation makes it so much easier to handle those negative thoughts when they inevitably pop up.
Because they will, right? It's not like we can just magically erase all negativity from our lives.
Totally. But Nadeau's big message is that we have a choice in how we respond. We don't have to let those thoughts control us, dictate our actions.
It's like we're taking back the power, right?
Exactly. And one of the most powerful tools Nadeau offers for this is gratitude.
Gratitude. Okay, I can get behind that. What does he say about it?
He's all about shifting perspective, focusing on what we're thankful for, even when things are tough.
It's like changing the channel in our brains from doom and gloom to something a little more upbeat, right?
Exactly. And it doesn't have to be anything major. Nadeau even suggests keeping a gratitude journal.
So just jotting down a few things you're grateful for each day.
Exactly. It could be something as simple as a sunny day, a delicious meal, a kind word from a stranger. The more you focus on the good, the less space there is for the bad.
It's like building up our immunity to self-sabotage, one grateful thought at a time.
It's about rewiring your brain to notice the good, to savor the positive moments.
It doesn't mean denying the challenges, but it's about choosing where you focus your energy. Right.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of Nadeau's work. It all comes down to choice. We can stay trapped in those mental prisons we create for ourselves, or we can choose freedom.
It's about recognizing those self-imposed limitations, those hostage-taking thoughts and saying, nope, not today.
It's about stepping into your power, embracing your potential, and creating a life that feels authentically you.
So to wrap things up, it seems like the key takeaway here is that we all have those seeds of greatness within us.
We really do. It's about nurturing those seeds, tending to our mental gardens, and creating the right conditions for them to flourish.
And that might take some work, some trial and error, but it's a journey worth taking.
Absolutely, because on the other side of that journey is a life filled with purpose, joy, and the freedom to be who you truly are.
What a powerful message to end on. We hope you enjoyed this deep dive into J. Paul Nadeau's Take Control of Your Life.
And remember, you are not a hostage to your own mind. You have the power to choose a different path, to break free from those self-imposed limitations, and to create a life you truly love.
So go out there and make it happen. We'll see you next time for another deep dive.